Hello.
Hello.
Hi.
I'm you.
All right, so we're now on YouTube.
Cool.
I'm you.
I'm just gonna check the stream over there also.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see. Ah, cool. Awesome. Great. There's us. Yay. Cool.
Hey.
Cool. Looks like the stream is working, Thomas. I'm seeing
Okay.
it on the, yeah. Cool.
Yeah, I'll just be on YouTube for this one.
Yeah, sure. Sounds good.
And I usually we get a few people that tune in on there, and then I invite them to join the Zoom if they want. Most people don't really do that. Some people, kind of get into the chat, but I'll keep an eye on the YouTube chat and read anything important.
Cool. Well, also, could we mute owner? I think I don't think he knows.
Hey.
Sure.
Thanks.
Yeah, that's another thing I should mention. If you're not presenting or playing back music or talking, we ask that everybody else mutes, just so that when we're playing music back and all that's going on, we don't want to have too much interference there. So but otherwise I think we're pretty much good to get started.
Cool. Sounds good.
Yes, of course.
Does everybody who is in here submit a track today?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, if we could just mute ourselves if we're not speaking, that'll be awesome. Thank you. Thanks. Now we can proceed, now that we've all muted ourselves. So thanks everyone for cooperating. But yeah, I think everyone who submitted a track, I have the tracks for. So let's actually start with the first one. That was from Maya. Maya, thanks for submitting this. And let's listen to it first. And then actually, I'm going to stop sharing my screen for a second. And then Thomas has probably heard this before, but I'll just do my quick spiel on feedback and how I deal with feedback. So thanks everyone for tuning in, especially if you're on YouTube as well, joining us. With 343 Labs, my name is Claire and I'm an instructor there. I'm an Ableton Certified Trainer, and I'm also an artist. So I also go by dolltr for those of you who know me by that name. Also, we're just going to remind ourselves that if we're not speaking, we're going to keep ourselves muted. We're going to keep ourselves muted in the chat. Thank you. Please keep yourself
You're
muted.
welcome.
Cool. So yeah, I'm an instructor at 343 Labs. Generally, it's interesting. A lot of people ask. I tell my students sometimes I don't enjoy giving advice a lot, but that's really not so much advice in general as much as it is unsolicited feedback, which I think is really important to consider. There's a time and a place for feedback, and oftentimes people, especially when you're starting out in your musical journey, people will tell you things like, oh, I listened to your track, you should change this and you should change this. But first of all, did you even ask them for feedback? You probably didn't if they were just saying that. So one thing to consider is maybe who exactly is giving the feedback and if it's being solicited in the first place. So even sometimes when my students send me tracks, if they don't ask me for feedback, I don't give them feedback. But I listen to it and I enjoy it and I appreciate it. And I tell them, thank you for sending them over. But if you do ask for feedback, then there's a time and place for that. And right now we're in a safe space to be able to do that. So there's also a couple of things that I like to share with people as tips for giving feedback. I usually try to do a sandwich approach, which is okay, here's what I liked about this. Maybe here's one thing that could be improved, and then kind of another thing to wrap things up. So that's generally what you'll hear me do in my patterns of giving feedback. And you don't have to oblige and follow it, but if you're looking for a place to get started with giving feedback in a conducive manner, a conducive environment, that may be a suggestion that you might like to consider. So with all of that said, now I'm going to share my screen as well as the audio with everybody of Maya's track that she sent in. And usually also for tracks that come in, I enjoy hearing a little bit about the backstory before. So Maya, I'm gonna unmute you for a second if you wanna just give us a quick shout out about what the background of your track was or how you started making your production.
Yeah, okay. How's my volume for you?
Oh, it's
This
great.
first
Yeah.
time I'm using these little headphones. Yeah, well, I think the song was most certainly inspired, first of all, it just tumbled out at like 1:30 in the morning. So, you know how that is. But it was certainly inspired by the stay-at-home quarantine thing. I have been staying at home since the middle of March. And I'm pretty solitary anyway, but just more so. So I just was feeling a bit squeezed and sort of really needing to use my writing to deal with my anxiety and feelings of isolation in a deeper way. I knew I had to go deeper just personally because I use my music as a kind of a therapy. So that's really where it came from. And, it's like all the old lifelong stuff too. But I think the quarantine really made it come out. So for me also, I just want to preface by saying, and you may totally disagree, I think the song is actually basically done. I have a few little concerns, which maybe we can talk about at the end. I don't want to like give hints at what I think could use a little help, but they're very minor.
Sure,
So,
sounds good.
I appreciate it. Thanks.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for sharing, Maya. So I'm going to mute you for a second. I'm also going to mute myself in a moment, but also just general practice, everyone. I liked what Maya said just now about not prefacing too much. And that's also something that you might want to consider if you're sharing your music with a group of people or even sharing your music with anybody. Sometimes it's useful to just hear what they think first without saying like, oh, I didn't like the mix of this and this and this and this and this. Because obviously if we've created it, we hear all of these things, but it's really nice to also just get a fresh listen to something as well. And generally, it's nice to listen to something and not speak over it. So that's why I'm going to mute myself in a second and we'll listen to Broken Line.
Broken love, broken toys. You're not the only one alone in your room, feeling rejected, disconnected. You're not the only one alone in your room, feeling neglected, disrespected. You know you're alive, feeling pushed aside, lost your lines, feeling left behind. The love we had didn't go away. I hope we make it another way. Broken love, broken toys, broken boys and girls, broken world, broken lines, broken sky. You're not the only one who got disconnected. You're not the only one alone in your room, feeling disaffected, disconnected. You're not the only one feeling unprotected. You're not the only one all up in your head. Did you ever think that you might have misled? We're disconnected, you might have misread. Broken love, broken toys, broken boys and girls, a broken world, broken lines, broken sky. You're not the only one. We got disconnected. If I'm getting through, you can too. Reach out and connect. Reach out and connect. I'll talk to you. I'm trying to live life, to remember my lines. Am I out of the loop? It's too hard to hide. I believe it. I'm not the only one all alone in my room, wanting connection, feeling disconnected. All my old wounds spilled into new rooms. I lost so much time, I got left behind.
Good job, Maya. That was awesome. I'm gonna unmute you too so that we can just have a bit of like a conversation about that. But yeah, great job. What were some things that
Thanks.
maybe you wanted to talk about specifically today?
I'm not sure about the bridge really exactly. I do use spoken word a lot.
So that's gonna be like around the breakdown over here.
Yeah,
I think.
yeah. And I had it without the singing in it first, and it was too sparse.
Mhm.
And I decided I wanted to add a different, you know, sort of a variation on the melody, which I think is the place to do it. But I don't know if I'm really done with it, or if I want to sort of switch it up a bit. So.
Yeah, totally. So if you don't mind me sharing my feedback, I thought that was really
Please.
great. Yeah,
Yes,
totally.
please, thanks.
Thought it was really, really great. I loved the development over the course of the entire production. I thought it was building up really slowly and in a good way that wasn't like too fast. Sometimes we can get a little bit overexcited with a lot of the layers that we're doing, but I thought you had a really great control over that. That's actually really hard to achieve. So great job on that. Yeah. One thing that I would maybe consider is that going along with how smoothly everything was, sometimes one thing that I find helps a lot with even giving a little bit of a change up as far as building different levels of energy goes is sometimes even just doing breaks. So like even just like, you know, taking out a quick section between the two different sections. So for example, if I can go back to over here, I believe we have the verse coming in.
Feeling pushed aside, lost your lines, feeling left behind. The love we had didn't go away. I hope we make it another way. Broken love.
Yeah, so right before Broken Lines, when you sang like Another Way, one thing that could have happened is
Space.
that, yeah, maybe a little bit of space. So,
Got it. Yeah, I hear you.
so it could be Another
Yeah, I
Way
hear you.
and Broken Lines. That could have been something. Or maybe even for the second time the chorus comes along. So like changing it up a little bit. The first time it goes in really smoothly. I love that transition
Actually,
yeah.
both the music under the first two courses is a bit different. And there's like scratching under the second one, and
totally.
I dropped some of the music. But so you're saying, yeah, I think what I did like a mini drop before each one. I could do more so, even like, but check it out. I'm not sure where, but thank you. Good idea.
Yeah, no problem. I think like one thing that we also forget is like you said, when you said the word space, like really the power of space and how powerful that becomes for that. Like sometimes not having something there and then bringing it suddenly back or suddenly taking it away and just creating even more room, not just even in terms of time, but in terms of like space and depth and like the depth of all the layers of your song. Because there's so many beautiful layers in this particular production that, you know, sometimes it seems like it might be a shame to take one of these away, but doing so can actually create an interesting type of variation as far as energy.
Oh, that's interesting. So in the bridge, it's funny you said that, because in the bridge, I actually had much less in the bridge.
Absolutely,
And then
totally.
now, and then I added more, and now you're saying to maybe take it away again, or take something. Oh, that's funny. That's really funny. Okay.
Yeah, we can revisit those. So let's listen to the bridge right now. I do believe it's over here. So let's listen.
A broken world, broken lines, broken sky. You're not the only one. We get disconnected. If I'm getting through, you can too. Reach out and connect. Reach out and connect. I'll talk to you. I'm trying to live life. To remember my lines. Am I out of the loop? It's too hard to hide.
So I added the singing, actually. So
Totally.
Like last week, that wasn't there.
It's interesting though. I actually really like the singing, but it's so great because I feel like there are two ways that this can work, or maybe even more than two ways, multiple ways it can work. Sometimes reintroducing the singing can, for example, make it more cohesive as an entire form. Because like the singing is kind of like the recurring theme throughout the entire production. Another thing that it could do though is is create a little bit of sameness. Not that it does in this sense, but it's like there's always vocals everywhere. So like there's no change up. I really loved the spoken word part. So that's why I almost wish that could have.
Oh, that's funny. Yeah.
a little
Okay.
bit more
That's interesting.
Yeah,
Yeah.
highlighted.
Yeah. I've only
Totally.
got 4 versions.
No, it's all good. It's fun. I feel like usually when I'm working on a track, it's so funny you mentioned that when I'm working on a track, I have like 8 versions of something sometimes, and it's just like it's totally normal. So you're totally good. Yeah, I think like it's weird. It's interesting to hear about how different people think of it. And I just wanted to take a moment to actually read out what Andreas thought. Andreas, if you don't mind, I'll read it out.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, he left some really great feedback. And cool. So Andrew said, nice job. You're getting way better really fast. Yeah, absolutely. I thought the drums had a good groove. I liked the Rhodes, the chords in there. Your vocals are getting clearer as well. One thing that bugged me a bit was this white noise or static sound throughout.
Oh, yeah.
Can't really tell where it's coming from. Which was detracting from the other instruments. And also thought the one shots fills and synths you had were super cool. And this, Andreas, is a really great example of feedback. So thanks also for doing that. This is really a very conducive structure that I found. So if anyone else is watching out there on the internet, and again, if you're looking for some way of giving feedback, that's a very, very well structured, and maybe in contrast to some other kinds of feedback that just says, this links to what I was talking about just now. But when you give feedback, oftentimes you don't really just want to give feedback that can't be acted on. You want to give things that people can work on. And this is a really great example because there are things that have been done well, executed well, like the drums, the Rhodes. And then Andrews is suggesting something like, okay, maybe the static or white noise thing could be a little bit more controlled and pulled back just a little bit.
Yeah.
And honestly, I think that's not a bad suggestion. Maybe you could play around with that as well. And perhaps even play around with some kind of filtering on the white noise. Because white noise, if we think about white noise in general, white noise is basically a representation of noise across all frequencies in the frequency spectrum. So maybe even filtering the noise could help a little bit. Maybe during choruses or even during the drop, coming in and bringing in a filter, a low pass or a high pass to control a little bit of that. But when you get to a chorus, maybe even expanding that so that you get more of that frequency spectrum out. So that could be something of interest as well. That's a technique that is actually often used by Armin van Buuren. I listen to a lot of his music, and he does that a lot, especially with the high end of pianos. Actually, he does that quite often. So it's a technique that he talks about too. And it's more than just noise. It's applicable to, I think, any instrument that has a very wide frequency spectrum. So for example, synths, you can have the low end, but you can also get some really gritty or bright types of high end from synths, and being able to control that in different ways often helps a lot with, working with energy levels. And just so that everyone's on the same page, if you're kind of maybe wondering a bit about what I mean with energy levels, if you're sorry if you're new to this, but energy levels typically when we think about higher energy levels, we think about higher frequencies that are associated with that. And with that comes, things like sibilance and elements like brightness that we often discuss when it comes to that. And if we can actually dive a little bit more into this, just one quick thing about some of the vocals, because I am a vocalist, so like I love listening to vocals and tracks and stuff. So I just wanted to bring this back here.
All my old wounds spilled into new rooms. I lost so much time. I got left behind.
So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to click through different sections in Maya's track over here. And I like everyone to, if you can, pay attention to the vocals and how they sound and their delivery and just the general overall presentation of the vocal. So we're going to jump between different sections.
The only one alone in your room, feeling rejected, disconnected. I hope we make it another way. Broken love, broken toys, feeling disaffected, disconnected. Girls, a broken world, a broken line. Am I out of the loop? I believe it. It's too
pause there. And Maya, I'm gonna unmute you for a second again because I love to ask you maybe 1 or 2 questions. Hold on, let me just unmute you. Cool, great.
Okay.
So yeah, so first of all, did you by any chance automate any of the vocals?
Well, by hand, yeah, I drew stuff and I did high pass filter on all the chorus.
Cool, awesome. So I think that's where the doubling's coming in. I think maybe if I could rephrase my question.
No,
or
well,
perhaps...
actually, there are layers of chorus, and there's like a stutter effect, there's beat repeat, there's effects on some of the chorus parts.
Totally, yeah, I loved those actually. I really liked how in the choruses there were all the different effects. One thing to consider though is that I almost feel like the actual volume of the vocals in different sections is exactly the same.
It actually, yes, it is. And I felt that the energy was higher in the chorus because I added 2 or 3 layers, no, actually like up to 4 layers. So I felt like I was trying to add a little more energy, but I didn't want it to be crazy because it's not a crazy song. You know, it's a kind of it's a bit of a chill vibe.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
I'm totally on board with you. I think like the additional layers of vocals certainly add to the energy, but I almost wonder if, say, for example, in the very first time the vocal appears in the verse, it's actually already super upfront in the mix.
yeah.
So I'm almost wondering if you maybe even took it down like a dB or 2, if that would let it even sit a little bit better. And that way, the moment you get into the chorus, when the full version of the chorus comes in, the vocals are really more in front in your face. So I guess the reason why I was asking about the automation is that sometimes don't be afraid to actually play with volumes between different sections, because when you have sections like the verses, traditionally when we think of constructing verses in productions, usually they tend to have fewer parts than, say, the choruses. So maybe the vocals actually don't have to be that loud. They could still be a little bit softer, and that might even help them to gel a little bit better just in the general mix overall.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that comment. That is something I've thought about a lot, and I really like a loud, clear, sort of a pop, deep vocal right up front like that. And that's something that's I've been addressing for a while now since I've been learning how to do this. I will play around with it. Thank you for the suggestion. Although for me, let's say the first chorus when that comes in, I like the way it just kind of goes bam. That's what I want.
Yeah, totally. I think the bam thing is is for sure. Like we always want that to have like the chorus, you know, come in really strong. And actually having the vocals in the sections before the chorus be a little bit softer could even make that even more stronger, if you know what I'm saying. Like that change could be even more drastic. And then because of that, we still get a stronger thing, but maybe it's definitely something to experiment about. I mean, one thing about feedback in general is that you don't have to take someone's feedback. Like there have been certain situations where, yes, it's even been a safe environment. I've given out lots of feedback and it's totally fine. You don't have to take the feedback. So yeah, absolutely. Don't be afraid to like experiment. And if something doesn't work, don't do it. Ultimately, I'm just another person. So like, you know.
Oh yeah, no, I will. I didn't really experiment with that too much, except for with like sort of the background. There were 2 different sets of harmonies going on. So I'll look at that for sure. Thanks very much.
Yeah, no problem. Cool. Thanks, Maya. And I'm just gonna actually read out something that Andrews just shared because I think it yeah, okay, this is interesting. So Andrews is saying, I assume you're doing the instrumental and the vocals all in one project. One idea might be to finish mixing the instrumental. So like, and then bouncing out and mixing the vocals in a new session. So kind of separating that. And that's a really interesting approach. I think it could be a good approach to try out. But also it's interesting because I've worked in different ways. And I find that for me, it's not necessarily a workflow thing as much as it is even sometimes on a per song basis. So sometimes for certain songs that I do, I find the need to do that. For other songs that I do, I don't necessarily need to do that. And maybe because at this point, I've become so used to mixing vocals and doing vocals in tandem with a lot of the production stuff that I do, that I personally do not tend to do this, but I do this if I'm producing for somebody else. So it could even be more of like a situational type of thing. So thanks for that suggestion, Andrea. It's really cool. In the meantime, yeah, let's move on. And thanks, Maya, for sharing. Yay, great. Let's move on to a track that I think Anto submitted. So is that actually Owner? I'm not sure if Owner is Anto. Cool. I hope it is. I'm gonna unmute Owner for a second. Hi. Hi, hello.
Hi,
Hi, was
how
this
are
your
you?
track that you submitted? Good, thanks.
Yes.
Awesome. So why don't you tell us a little bit about it?
It's electronic music. I do
Okay,
dance music.
sure. Was there a specific type of genre that you were going for, or?
Uh, it's techno or electronic music.
Okay, cool, sure. So,
It's techno and electronic, but
yeah,
it's
awesome.
not a vocal. It's music also, but on music.
Yeah, understood. Do you happen to have what was the background of this? Why did you write this particular track?
Because this is my hobby, and I prefer like this.
Okay, sure, cool. So in that case, let's just
I love this.
Sure, I think you're cutting out a little bit, but that's okay, no problem. We'll just see if we can start doing this. I'm going to mute everybody as usual, and this is a track we'll listen to now. Ooh, give me 1 second. I'm going to try to download that instead. Maybe that'll... Cool, no problem. We have got it. Thanks everyone for your patience. Really appreciate it. I'm just going to open up this track over here. Okay. Interesting. Give me 1 second, everybody. We're having some suffix issues.
I had more luck playing this one like in the
Cool.
internet. I don't know. When I was trying to download it, I had some issues playing it back, but
Yeah, thanks, Thomas. Do you think you would be able to share your screen instead for
Sure.
this? Thank you.
Yeah.
Appreciate it. I'm gonna stop sharing.
let me just pull it up.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks. For some reason, it's not coming up on my computer with a suffix, so it's asking me to open it with text edit.
Yeah, I had somewhat of a similar thing, but it plays fine in like Google Drive, so I'm assuming
Cool.
that'd be fine to play from there.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate it.
Okay, so I'll share my screen. Do this. Ooh, it's asking me to open my preferences. Oh boy.
It's a
So
little strange, right? That's like,
yeah, well, my thing's asking me to quit Zoom so that I can
oh
do.
dear. Okay.
Is this the first time I'm using Zoom on this laptop?
Oh goodness. Okay, let's not do that. I'm gonna try to do this with a suffix that was. Let me see if I can add it to here. Okay.
Do you think if I send you another version, it would help?
It's okay. Actually, I think I might be able to do it. I tried an experiment and I think it will work. So we should be all good.
Amazing.
Cool. Let's try this out. Thanks everyone for your patience. Really appreciate it. I'm going to open with another device. Benefits of having worked for Apple. All of these workarounds. Amazing. Great. We should be good, actually. Cool. I'm going to share my screen with everybody again.
Amazing.
Yeah. Very cool. Here we go. awesome. Thanks for sharing that. So I'm going to unmute you for a second, Anto. And do you want to say anything about it? That was awesome. Thanks for sharing that.
You like it?
I think you, sorry, what were you saying?
You like it?
Yeah,
The
totally.
music?
Yeah, it was good. Do you want to say anything else about it?
No, just to let you know my music.
Awesome, cool. So just to, maybe I'll just start giving feedback then. And if anyone wants to, in the Zoom call of us wants to leave some feedback in the chat, you're more than welcome to as well. You can type that into the chat. But this is really great. I really enjoyed it. I think my favorite part about it was the just how well balanced a lot of the elements were. Like I love the kick. I love how a lot of the different layers were coming in and out. So I like that a lot. One thing that I would actually maybe try to revisit, and this is a small thing, but that there's a synth that comes in for the entire song and it's kind of just there. I'm going to scroll back a little bit and play it for you. That main synth, dum 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 dum. That main synth, it comes in and has different patterns throughout the entire, but it's present there throughout the entire song. And I think after a while, we become really familiar with the timbre of the synth, which sounds nice. It's a very nice type of pure tone, very pulse squarey type of tone. But after a while, it's like we become a bit too used to it. So maybe one thing that could help a little bit is throughout the different sections, when you bring in the different types of drums, maybe adding a little bit of automation to change the quality of the sound. So maybe making it a little bit brighter, maybe making it less plucky and making it more sustained. So changing the envelope of the sound could help also, just to make it a little bit more evolving, because oftentimes with techno and oftentimes with specifically things like ambient techno, even though this isn't necessarily ambient techno, but it is a form of techno, we want to be careful with things becoming too repetitive. Of course, we want things to repeat and we want things to loop, but having some level of evolving over time can usually help to keep listeners very interested and keep the ear engaged. So maybe adding a little bit of automation to that main synth could help a little bit with that. But overall, I really loved the track in general, how it was going over time. I'd also be a little bit careful, and it's a small thing, but it's an important thing for presentation when we're sending tracks to people and we're sharing tracks. But let's listen to the end of your track over here. So did everyone kind of hear how there was actually a very sudden cutoff at the end of the track? So instead of us hearing in full that reverb tail die off, instead we were getting this. So it plays, the track plays, and here it suddenly kind of dies away without actually tailing off properly. So that's just something it's more of an organizational type of thing, but it's just something to be mindful of whenever we're submitting and we're sharing things, making sure that last tail cuts off. It's more of like a professional type of thing that we try to do as a courtesy for anyone who's listening to our music, making sure that we don't cut things off at the end. And I think, did Maya leave something in? Yeah, Maya said something. It was very pretty. I would just like to hear a bit more change. Yeah, change over time, maybe some filtering at the end. I loved the end with the reverb. Actually, the reverb with that sweep was wonderful. That was really nice, and the delay as well. But yeah, again, just having that, kind of evolve a little bit more too. Curtis said something too. Let me just finding the chat. Like the windows are everywhere. I love how that synth struck a balance between.
I use Ableton. I use program Ableton. I love it.
Yeah, sure. All of us use it. That's why we're here. But yeah, so I'm just trying to read the comments here as well. Love how that synth struck a balance between delicate and assertive. Yeah, totally. I think it's interesting that you mentioned those specific adjectives, Curtis, because I feel like oftentimes when we think about synths, we're trying to make them contribute to a certain emotion. And I think the assertive part was definitely in that. So I really enjoyed that too, and the repetition as well. Yeah, Andrew, I totally felt like I was in a nightclub in Berlin too. So I think both of us were probably like in the same in the same space of that, like in Berkheim or something. But yeah, kick drum's very nice. Percussion was great too. Perhaps adding a main offbeat hi-hat. That's a really great suggestion, actually. So what, just to illustrate what Andreas was talking about, everybody, let's listen to a section of this particular track.
It's me. I make the mastering and mix it.
Yeah, sure. So let's actually listen to this before we continue speaking, but thanks for your input. Hold on. So just that continuous doom, 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 doom. And I'm gonna mute that. Just that continuous doom, 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 doom. Maybe having like complementary doom, t, 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 t. That's kind of adding to that. So just to illustrate that, because I know that you stepped away from your computer for a minute, Anto. What we wanted to consider was that doom, t, 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 t. So having an offbeat hi-hat to complement the kick drum could be an interesting thing to experiment with. And Andreas also said, I think adding more lead in and lead out effects. Yeah, totally. Like risers and sweeps could also help, especially to make it more DJ and listener friendly. Yeah, that's a great suggestion.
I use Echo in Ableton, the plugin.
Totally awesome. Yeah, sounds great. One thing that I think, just actually even jumping off what Andreas said about making it more DJ or listener friendly, might be to even count the number of bars that you're going on for, because some sections, I think if you listen back to it again, some sections were a little bit irregular in their length. Generally, when we're thinking about length in bars, when we're making music, we try to stick to multiples of 4 or multiples of 8. So like 4 bars or 8 bars or 16 bars. I think there were a couple of sections in there where we may have had like 9 or 10 bars, and that's cool. That's totally fine. You can have different numbers of bars too, but usually oftentimes in a lot of music that we intend for dance music or for house music, techno genres like these, we tend to have a more regular set of bars. So like 4 bars or 8 bars, not so much like 9 bars or 15 bars. Oh, those could be cool too, but definitely making them, in that case, more listener friendly with clearer transitions would be great too.
I'm not losing too much loop. I do everything to go in to not looping the music.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's totally great, and that's actually a little bit different from what I was saying. So what I was saying was counting the number of bars versus loops.
Yes.
Absolutely, loops would repeat, but the number of bars should still be a little bit consistent. So you could absolutely do a piece that's a section of like 8 bars and have everything be different and not repeat, but it's still 8 bars. So there's still a little bit of regularity to that sectioning. Again, it's just a suggestion, so you don't have to take it if you don't want to, but it's usually what is very conducive for a lot of tracks that end up being very club friendly and listener friendly too. I think Andreas's point about that was really important too, because we don't necessarily want to estrange our listeners, but we want to make sure that we pull them in and that we grab them in with any of the tracks.
I like to have feedback from the other to know what kind if they like the music.
Yeah, sure. So if you like to, you can read the chat, because I just read all of the feedback from the chat. It wasn't actually from me. It was from the chat. So if you want to log in, if you want to check out the chat in Zoom, you can see everybody's feedback, and it's all been really positive, and thanks everyone for contributing that too. I was just explaining that, and yeah, sure, go for it.
I want to ask you something. If I put in I give him to the DJ play in the music, my music, or that's not
sorry, do you think you could repeat that?
If I give my music to a DJ, the DJ play the music, this my music is good for DJ for parties.
So it could be good if you maybe continue to work a little bit on the sectioning. I think the mood of your track is really great for that. The mood, the feeling of it is really great. Maybe a little bit more of what like Andrew suggested, for example, could be helpful for a lot of this. So if you continued working on the track, I'd say it would definitely be really great for giving it to DJs and to having them play it as well. Something else to consider is that even if you give something to a DJ, and this is actually a question that comes up a lot, so I'd love to address this overall in general, but oftentimes as producers, we may be very eager for other people to play our tracks, but it's also very normal for DJs to say no or to say no. So don't be sad if a DJ doesn't want to play your track. I would say it's almost just a matter of time and either finding the right DJ who will play that track or just continuing to work on your craft. Because I think that's also a huge part of it. Like sometimes when you're giving your track to a DJ, they may not necessarily be the right DJ to play that. Like if you gave a techno track to a drum and bass DJ, they probably wouldn't play the techno track. But if you find a techno DJ, they're more likely to play that techno track. And just jumping in again on what Andrew said, thanks so much for typing in all these pieces of feedback into the chat, everybody. Yeah, totally. I also agree with that. I do think it would fit the techno scene, and it's definitely more of like the genre fitting into techno as well. But yeah, absolutely. Sudden Death definitely wouldn't play this, so I agree with that as well. Finding the right DJ to play the track and even fit it into their set. I think one thing that people think of, sometimes forget is that DJs themselves can have different genres. Like sometimes you'll have DJs who play multiple kinds of genres. So for example, me, I have specific sets where I play exclusively house, for example, but then other times I do future bass and I do drum and bass, and you wouldn't necessarily have that for you. I wouldn't necessarily put a techno track into any of my drum and bass tracks. Like I would keep that very separate for different sets too. So it's really subjective and depends on the DJ and on the situation itself.
Sorry, I'm doing a house music also, not techno and electro. I do every genre of music, electronic and house and techno and like this.
Yeah, that's great to know. So just again, going back to what I was saying, we usually want to match the right track with the right DJ. So that's we can make as many kinds of music as we want. Like I make pop, I make drum and bass, I make future bass, I make hip hop, I make all of these genres too. But when I send my music to a DJ, I need to find the right DJ for that. I don't want to be sending my hip hop, even if I'm really good friends with a DJ who's like a hip hop DJ, I'm not going to send that DJ my drum and bass tracks. I'm going to find the right DJ for my track to send it to if I want to send it to a DJ. Or sometimes if your music is already publicly available, then maybe DJs will select the track for you. So you wouldn't even need to send it to a DJ. They'll pick your track and they'll buy the track and they'll include it in their set. So it really depends on the situation.
I'm happy you like my music.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing it. Cool.
You're welcome.
Let us see if we can move on to the submission that Andrea's had. So I'm going to take a quick pause and reshare my screen. That's the right screen. New share. And let's do this. Cool, awesome. So let me pull up the list of folks over here. Andreas, I'm gonna unmute you for a quick second and let's see, hello?
Is the mic working?
Yeah, it's actually really loud.
Okay, sorry.
No, it's
because
all
last
good, no
time,
problem.
last time I did this feedback, it was not working properly. So just wanted to make sure it was working fine.
Yeah, sure. No, it works great. Thanks. So do you want to tell us a little bit about the track that you submitted, Andreas?
Yeah, sure. It's just more like dubstep, trap hybrid stuff. Actually, it's one of the first ones I've done after like a few weeks. Like I just kind of been getting back into it. So this is the first one that I did just yesterday, wrote it and just kind of, this is like I'd say it's like 75% there. Some mixing things that probably need to be adjusted. There's like some clicks and pops and stuff here and there, but that's like, I'll fix that. But it's more, I just want to see what you guys think. Like, I don't know if you guys probably aren't all into the whole dubstep scene as much as I am. So just let me know if you guys like it. Because if you guys like it, then I'm sure other people in that scene are going to definitely like it. That's been the way I look at feedback is if people who don't know anything about the music, I'm not assuming you guys don't or anything like that. But if someone who doesn't likes it, then other people who do like that music will most likely really like it. So that's the way I look at feedback.
Totally. I'm actually really glad that you brought that up, Andrews, because I'm pretty much the same way too. Like I feel as if the not to say and again forgive my language, but if the untrained ear likes it, then it's probably likely that the trained ear will like it, you know?
I guess that's the right way to put it. Yeah, to someone with an untrained ear to like this genre likes it, then someone who listens to it a lot will probably think it's really good.
Yeah, totally. And I think it's interesting because like this is a topic that comes out a lot, even again, like just in general, like people oftentimes will ask, say, within a circle of producers, like, hey, what's good and what's not. And that's great to hear like feedback from everyone who's a producer, but it's also extremely valuable to get feedback or if you want to let people who are non-producers listen to your music too. And they could just be like regular musicians. They could be like, just singers or something, or they could even just be not musicians at all. And that's always a really great approach to take. So yeah, absolutely. Let's mute all of ourselves. I'm going to mute everybody and we'll listen to Get With It, version 1, master.
We'll soul with it. What's up? What's up with it? What's up with it?
Yeah, great job, Andrew. Just gonna unmute you for a second. That was awesome. Thanks for sharing that. Yeah, totally. And we had some really great feedback in the chat also. So I'm just gonna read some of the thoughts that we had come in. Yeah, Curtis said like the vocal whisper chops, those are killing. Loved the panning also. That was really awesome. Yeah, noise as well. Thomas really liked the groove at the drop. I think all of us did. I could see all of us like jamming out. And yeah, totally. The chops were amazing. I think I loved the overall theme of that throughout the entire track. I thought that was probably my favorite part. Loved also the space between like the different like hits and the different things. Oh, we had a question. Give me 1 second. Oh, this Windows thing is moving out. Oh, cool. Yeah, thanks for your feedback, Curtis. So just to read the feedback so everyone hears it on YouTube as well. Really dig the main growl. Totally gives the Mr. Bill vibes. I had a little bit of that too. I'd love to hear a bit more high end on it. Not sure if the low pass filter was intentional. That's a really great piece of advice, and maybe we'll keep that in view for a second. Andreas, if you want to actually tell us maybe what the remaining 25% you were thinking of, because you mentioned this was about 75% done. So if you want to maybe share about what you were thinking of adding after this.
So yeah, for Curtis, I think yeah, I'll have to take a look at the I didn't really low pass anything on that one. I might have to beef up the high end a little bit. But for this 25%, I think it's more like in the rise. I was going for more minimal rise though, so maybe there's not too much going on there. The build sections, and then I think in terms of just like in the second half, the sub doesn't follow the groove of the main bass sound yet, so I haven't done that part. But but that's easy to do. So that I'll have to fix that. And then there's like a few things about like there's some clicks and pops and stuff where, you know, I haven't faded some of the audio, like chops and samples and stuff. So I still have to go fix that. Stuff like that, just cleaning everything up.
Yeah, totally. One thing that I do like to do is, which you may have noticed me do, is ask you specifically what you wanted to add, because that was essentially like most of the stuff that I was going to also to speak about. And I think it's really great that like we're kind of in a way, when you think about a production, you're thinking of yourself like achieving certain milestones and being like, okay, this is done, and then here's the next step to do that. I also will say that any audio that we share through Zoom has a really, really depleted high end. So don't feel as if you're listening to like really high quality audio, everybody. We're not. We're not listening to very high quality audio. We are, though, listening to just the overall level of the mix. And this is even something to consider, because if you think about it, your fans will probably not be listening on speakers. They may even just be listening off of their phone. They may be listening off some really bad compression on YouTube or Spotify. And by compression, I mean the algorithm that compresses the audio for that. So yeah, just some things to also consider. But that said, really loved the entire thing. Were you considering, do you think this might be the fixed length of it, or are you developing sections of it also?
No, this is it. This is the full length.
Cool,
So,
awesome.
yeah.
No, I think it works great. I think it works well. It's punchy, pretty nice, and like short and sweet type of thing, which I really like. I think I agree with you. I do think maybe the builds could be a little bit more, you know, gearing up towards each drop. But that said, I love the space like right before each drop. Let's take a listen again, everybody, so that we can hear back as well.
So with it.
I love just the vocals, and like this is a little bit of what I was speaking about just now with Maya, like having just a specific one instrument, dropping everything out, and then having everything come back in. So I really loved that. I thought that was amazing. One thing that I loved also is the extra panning stuff in the yeah, that was awesome. I feel like panning is probably one of the most underrated tools, I think, in a lot of production. Like we forget how powerful it can be. And I think that definitely helped a lot bring out the vocal chops as like a recurring theme. Because especially in the first drop even.
So with it.
Like having those different chops panned to the left and the right, like gives you a lot of ear candy type of things that happen. So I love that a lot too. Now, if you don't mind me giving one suggestion, if I could, one thing that I love about the growl is it is consistent, but I do feel that it could also be a little bit detrimental to the as far as like engaging interest goes. And maybe this is a little bit of it's something to experiment with also, as pretty much everything is, but perhaps even using some other kind of audio effect and using it to add maybe a little bit of modulation to this particular growl sound that you're having. Maybe what I'm thinking of in my head is that, for example, if let's say you put on a specific kind of distortion, maybe automating the distortion at certain points in time to create a little bit more high end or a little bit more mid-range, depending on exactly what kind of distortion that you get, so that instead of the sound being like this, so you get whoa, 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 whoa. It could be whoa, 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 whoa. So a little bit of that crunchiness might even add a little bit more variation, and it could even be something that's very random, so that way, like the listener is always like, oh, that's an interesting addition to it. One thing that it was also really interesting is that some parts of the sound design here reminded me a little bit of the music that comes out of Zebler and Canty Experience. I don't know if you've heard of them before.
Who is it?
Zebler and Canty Experience. I'll type their name into the chat. They're pretty cool. They're interesting. They don't really do dubstep per se. They do a lot of like trance and a little bit crazier dance music genres. But the sound design that you did reminded me of them, because they do like a lot of growly stuff and sometimes even very minimal but very punchy types of things, depending on the tracks that they have. But they might be even maybe a a group of, they're two people, but they're actually more of like a half of them does music and half does the visual. So they're like an audio visual duo that do a lot of really cool things together. One thing that they do a lot is in music, or at least Encanti does. Encanti is the audio producer half of this duo. One thing that Encanti does a lot is he plays a lot even with the pitch envelopes of certain things. So like say even in this particular section, it's all just like one pitch. Maybe it could be worthwhile experimenting maybe with a little bit of the pitch itself. So either pitch bends or transposition when you're in clip view, playing with the transposition envelope of a specific clip. So whoa, like having it distort, but also maybe even dip down a little bit in its pitch could be an interesting type of thing to do.
Actually, that's a good point, because the second section I did more with the filtering and stuff, and that's how you get more of the groove and whatnot in the growl. So that these sounds, like the main bass sounds, I made purely in audio. There's no synths at all.
Cool. Nice.
Purely audio. So the way I did it was just like micro sample a waveform from something, and then just put it in a sampler, and then do it that way, and then you can re-record the way I was experimenting with it was like you resample that into the whole phrase. You resample that growl into a new audio clip, and then you put that into a sampler, and then you can now you can modulate everything with the samplers, like LFOs and pitches and stuff. So I had only gotten around to messing with the volume and getting the groove with the volume, but I'll look at the pitch, because the sampler gives you so much power to just like modulate everything. So that's what when I do the second pass, I'm gonna mess around with that in the first drop especially. I agree, the first drop is maybe too consistent in some places, but I have to go take a look at that.
Yeah, no, that was really great though, and I like how both of you and also Maya in the chat was talking about like resampling. I feel like that's another of those really like underutilized tools in Ableton Live. Like people forget how powerful just taking a piece of audio and then working it again, and then reusing audio that's been put into one context and putting it into a different context, how powerful that can be. So I love that you did that. I love that there were no actual like synths in here, but just like samples. And if you don't mind me asking, where did you originally take the sample from? I think people might be curious about it.
Like for which sounds?
For the main growl you were talking about.
Oh, so yeah, so the main growl, I mean, it was actually the reference track I had. It's a project. I just had a reference track. And I just took like a snippet of one shot that they had in there. But you just resample like a micro, like literally one single cycle waveform of the whole audio file that this reference track, and then you just use that one single cycle and get a tone, and then go from there and just process the tone and just beef it up into like the sound that you like, basically.
Yeah, totally. Sounds great. No, I think it's interesting to hear about these things, especially even maybe for the people joining us on YouTube who maybe don't know about this, but absolutely you can totally get almost even an entire song out of just one particular sample. And that's actually a challenge that I do with a bunch of my students. We do this like we do like a 1-word challenge even, where we record a word. So it could be like dinner, and you have to make your whole song out of the word dinner. So create a kick drum from dinner, a snare from dinner. And you can totally do that. I've done it before a bunch of times with like different words like dinner. Like microscope was also one that we tried to do, that was harder because there's actually no very hard plosives in that sound. So it's a bit harder to get a kick drum out of it. But dinner is good because d is the kick drum itself.
I think there's a good, AU5 has
totally
a really good video. He did this challenge where, I don't know who it was, but it was maybe like someone gave him a sample of like a door creaking or something, and he made an entire house track out of it. Literally,
totally.
Kick drum, the drum, like all the percussion, the synths, like everything out of that one audio sample. So I think that, and he has like a whole 20-minute breakdown of how he did all the sounds. So based on what you're saying, I think like that would be a video that you want to watch for sure if you want to learn something about like audio techniques. And
Totally.
That's
a really great point. I think like if anyone's watching out there on the internet or anyone in the Zoom, there are so many really great producers who do these types of challenges. It's like a one sample and then everybody flips it kind of challenge. Andrew Huang does a variation of that, but a funny backstory is that actually the challenge itself kind of originated from, I don't know if Thomas probably knows Ben Casey. Ben Casey, who works with Ableton. Ben used to be a bit more involved in this festival called Together that was in Boston. And Ben actually was the one who originally created the idea. So thanks, Ben, for bringing that concept into the world. But that said, AU5 is also really great, not just because of the really great sound design that he does, but he's really great at explaining that. And oftentimes, you know, you can be a really great producer, but you may not be the best explainer at a lot of stuff, or like, you know, the best person breaking that down. But a couple of people who I really look up to who can produce really well, but also explain things really well are AU5. Mr. Bill is also really great at that. Il Gates is really great at that too. Andrew Wong is great at that as well, but in a little bit of a different type of vein from maybe the kind of production that we're currently thinking of. But yeah, lots of really great producers who do interesting breakdowns. I do that too. Hopefully I'm good. I can't speak for myself, so whatever. But yeah, definitely looking for producers who are able to demonstrate things and then, you know, re-engineer a couple of these things for anyone who's curious. It's always really great to do on YouTube. So if anyone's looking for YouTube stuff during quarantine, you can try doing that as well. Cool. Thanks so much for sharing your track, Andreas. Any last thoughts that you had, or any specific things you wanted to talk about for feedback?
I guess, did you guys like it or not?
I think from the chat, like everyone loved it. Like that was awesome. I loved it. Thought it was great. Cool. I'm more into, I am into dubstep, but more of like the melodic type of dubstep. But this was really great. I think it definitely fits like the hybrid type of trap dubstep thing that you were mentioning. So definitely falls into that category and fits a lot of the idiosyncrasies of those genres. So great job.
Thanks.
Yeah, awesome. So I'm gonna mute her. Oh, Maya, actually, did you want to say something or?
No.
Okay, cool. Because I noticed that you, no, it's all good. I noticed that you were like unmuted. So I was like, okay, cool. No, it's all good. Otherwise I am gonna unmute Thomas though. And let's see, Thomas. Not sure if I'm unmuting you, but yeah. Hey Thomas, did we get any other tracks come in?
Let me just double check if we had anything, but typically we ask people that they do it a couple hours beforehand. So I think anything that we might have gotten we'll probably save for next week.
Yeah, sure. Because I saw the chat also on the other place. So
yeah. Yeah, some people get on the YouTube and always want to like throw stuff in, but we encourage them to come back and join the Zoom next time. So yeah, thank you to Claire. I guess this is a shorter one. I was kind of expecting it to be with the holiday and everything.
Yeah, no worries. It's all good.
Yeah, thank you to Claire. I really liked what you kind of provided in terms of the way you kind of handle feedback, you know, with other artists. And, you know, I'm sure lots of your students do a similar thing, but it's definitely something I'll take note of for upcoming sessions and try to implement some of this into that. I think that it was conducted in a very nice way.
No, thank you. No, it's interesting because like I feel, I don't know if anyone's been in, I'll stop sharing my screen also. Maybe this is like a more conversational type of thing, but I don't even know if anyone has been in the same situation as me. But when I was just starting off producing, like people would just tell me things. Like I wouldn't ask them for advice, but they would just start telling me things. And then you kind of get the question of like, who do you actually listen to? Do you listen to everybody? Do you listen to nobody? Do you just ignore people? And I think like I do admit that I'm only able to say this now because of the like trajectory that my production has gone on, but like I don't take any unsolicited feedback at all. Like I don't really care. Like you could be a more experienced producer, but I'm not, if I didn't ask you for feedback, I'm not taking it. And here's the thing, experienced producers will never give you unsolicited feedback. So that's how you know the difference also. It's like we've all kind of been there and we've been in that situation and we were very aware of that. So oftentimes if you have an experienced producer who has been doing it for a long time, they will almost always never give you unsolicited feedback. So that's also another indication of whether or not you should take feedback from somebody or not. And then of course there's the situation of being in a feedback circle is then very different because then we're all, you know, submitting ourselves and saying, yes, we're okay with receiving any kind of feedback. So then that's a different situation, like this situation. But in any other kind of application, when maybe you're not, when you're just like bringing your track and offering it to a friend to listen to in the car, and then they start giving you all sorts of feedback or anything, maybe you can think twice about whether you actually want to try things out or not. But yeah, thanks, Thomas.
Yeah, I found myself in like so many situations where it's like music I've released and somebody's like, oh, this is so good, but like this one part, like you got to change. And you're like, it doesn't really work like that. 'Cause you're not going to like put out your
Yeah.
edit or something of it. Like it's crazy,
Totally.
but yeah, no, I agree with that very much.
Yeah, and I think like honestly, if there's anything to take away from this session, I hope maybe everyone's kind of taken away that if even if you get feedback, like you don't have to take it. Like it's cool. Like I could give my students feedback and like they're not forced to take it. It's really just like a form of like suggestions. And if it's delivered in the proper way, you're gonna, and this maybe is me speaking more as a teacher, but if feedback is delivered in the right way, then your student's gonna walk away with more questions to think about what they've done, and they're not going to walk away disheartened, which I think receiving unsolicited feedback often runs the risk of doing. So yeah.
Yeah, we see a lot of people that oppose each other like in the feedback session. It's funny, like someone would be like, I love this, and then somebody else would be like, nah, that's terrible. So it's like you see that, you know, it's hard to please everybody, and you got to pick really what's going to make you happy. I feel like at the end of the day, because it's your
Absolutely.
art and you're trying to, you know, please yourself. It's for other people, but you'll be most happy if you kind of stay true to yourself, I feel like, in a lot of ways.
Totally. That just hit the nail on the head, Thomas. So that was like, yeah.
Thanks. Awesome. So if there's nothing else that, you know, we need to really discuss, we could probably wrap it up. Thanks again to Claire. You know, she did a great job, like I was saying. And I'd like to invite all you guys back next week. We're going to have Abe Duque, another one of our instructors. He's an awesome guy. I took classes with him a long time ago, but he's great for like mixing feedback, and he's really big into electronic music. So I'd encourage anybody interested in that kind of stuff to join us again. But thanks again to Claire and everybody who came by today.
Thank you, Claire and Tom.
Yeah.
Thanks, everybody else. Really
Thanks,
nice to hear
everyone.
everybody.
Yep. Good.
Bye. See you soon.